So, hey there, friends. We're going to finish up our contact diseases. Sort of at this point, we're at the miscellaneous contact diseases. Oh, some things like leprosy, MRSA, fun things to talk about, but they don't really fit into great categories. These are basically hard to put into route of entry categories because they've got multiple routes. They are not necessarily all that well understood. Sometimes it is a matter of an unnatural disturbance in the force. No, in normal flora. We've got all this bacteria covering us, and we depend on a rather benign population being there. If, for whatever reason, antibiotics, bacteria species start to fade back, we have then the opportunity for some less pleasant bacteria to come in there. So let's just go through here a few more bits and pieces. Here's a fun one. This here is leprosy, also known as Hansen's disease. The primary infection route is respiratory, but not very efficient. It is requires a very long incubation period. It's active only in the extremities. The reservoir in the Americas is our friend here, the armadillo. It's gram-positive, and it has very specific growth requirements. Most humans are going to end up being resistant, and actually a very small number of people that are exposed to it will develop leprosy. But it used to be something that was so severe visibly and so concerning that they would have people segregated into leper colonies and things. But it's absolutely treatable with antibiotics, and it's not really all that transmissible. So 100 years ago or so, there were leper colonies, and people were very concerned about working in the leper colonies because of the possibility of getting this. But really, you could work there, and most people would never have even the potential of getting sick. And it was a fairly difficult job to do because people do look pretty horrific, but it's actually a fairly safe thing to do. These days, leprosy is actually quite rare. How about just staph infections? These are things that start to happen as the bacteria that is normally on your skin, because we are covered with staph, begins to actually get a foothold in some ways. You can manifest this as boils and things like that. Like if you ever have a zit that starts to get inflamed, very often that is going to be a staph infection. There are a variety of ways that it manifests itself. These sort of superficial dermal infections known as impetigo. Things that can start to happen is if you have enough bacteria around, you can end up with toxic shock syndrome, where you have enough bacteria present producing toxins that cause a lot of physiological damage. Organ failure. This has been associated with things like tampon use. When you have bacteria that are getting into the body, and they then can start to grow up enough that you actually end up having a sufficient bacteria present there that you end up having a toxic shock. Part of this is, not to be overly graphic, but there are specific tampons that were very absorbent, and you might be able to wear them for a very long period of time. And what happens, of course, is the bacteria then can begin growing on the material and start a large enough infection. So there you go. Something that perhaps you've heard about that is a significant problem. And this is a form of Staph aureus that is resistant to most antibiotics. It is known as methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, also known as MRSA. Perhaps you've heard of this. So MRSA is been on the rise up. It's difficult to control because it's antibiotic resistant to most of the standard antibiotics. And it is a bacterium that's on the skin surface. And so you may very likely have MRSA or methicillin-resistant Staph aureus on you. And in general, just like with all of these different staph infections, if you're in reasonably good health, you have a happy bacterial flora, it's not going to have a problem. But with various issues, going on antibiotics, stress, different kinds of chronic diseases like diabetes and things, can shift your flora and now allow this form of the Staph aureus to get a foothold in places where you don't want it, like a puncture wound or a little pimple. And because you can't treat it with antibiotics, it just starts to rage. And so that can be a problem. Here's another kind of catch-all spot. The idea that really on our teeth, we've got a very complex biofilm. There's all kinds of different bacteria on your teeth. So here's a poor fella that's got some pretty severe cavities. They haven't been to the dentist in a while. Don't let that be you, but still. Reasonably toothbrushing, probably pretty good. Mainly, maintaining a healthy oral flora is a good thing to do. You can end up with bacteria getting into the crevices and things, and that starts a inflammation process where you have immune response getting up in there. Here's a scanning electron micrograph of bacteria on a tooth material. And so, you're going to have all kinds of different bacteria in your mouth all the time. And it actually can begin to form this biofilm with a variety of different kinds of bacteria present there. So, cavity is actually kind of an interesting thing in that it has to begin with this idea of what's called demineralization, or the extraction of some of the minerals in the tooth enamel. And strong acids can begin this demineralization. Sugars can be very easily converted or support bacterial growth and generate things like lactic acid and pyruvic acid, for that matter. A whole range of different kinds of acid-producing bacteria there. That begins to remove the some of the different complexes that are making your enamel really hard. And over time, this weakened enamel then can be something that bacteria can get into and start to actually further cause decay. So lots of food and beverages have low pH, which isn't necessarily the only aspect of it. It's having low pH and then having lots of sugars for the bacteria to grow on. But you always have this biofilm on your teeth. So that covers a lot of our various sort of bacterial diseases. Of course, not complete. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but still, this is a pretty good range. I think we're going to stop here at this part and actually look to develop an exam off this material and see where we go. It's Friday afternoon, and I'm tired, and I'm about to say we'll talk on Monday. In fact, that's what I'm going to say. We'll talk on Monday and catch up and see how things are going. All right? So that's all I have to say. Bye.